and then we'll take questions. And again, in the chat, go ahead and type any question that you want to have answered in there. Mrs. Lopez is going to be monitoring those, and then we're going to go through those towards the back end of the session here. So let me start by, again, thanking you for being here and letting you know that we're looking forward to getting back in person with all the programs, full steam ahead, ASAP. That's what we want to get to. And I don't know that we're unique in that. I think a lot of schools are driving to that. We do have the COVID restrictions in place, particularly from the governor's recent executive order that in-person classes are not to be held until at least August 17th. So we've decided, instead of deferring things, to start online. And so that's going to happen on our Google Classroom platform. Teachers are going to have some additional training prior to that to make sure that that experience is as high quality as possible. But we're hoping that we will be back in class, in person, August 17th, or as soon as we can at that particular date. Now, there's lots of data about COVID, and I'm not going to say that I'm a PhD. I'm not a scientist, and I don't play one on TV. So, but I do want to just comment that we definitely have all kinds of things that we're seeing that are scaring the pants off of us. And, you know, what are we supposed to rely on? What are we supposed to depend on? What I typically look at is I look at the Arizona Department of Health data, because that's effectively what Dr. Kara Christ is using to counsel Governor Doug Ducey. And that's really the data that he's making decisions off of. So I want to at least look at that data. Now, whether I agree or disagree doesn't really matter, but I want to look at the same data that they're looking at. And I want to make sure I'm looking at all the data, not just some of the data. So I wanted to start here by sharing a couple of slides of some data that has come out of the Department of Health recently that I'd like to just highlight. Now, I'm going to present a screen here, and hopefully this is coming across. I'm going to give it just a second. There's some trending data that I want to look at. Now, we all know that in June, Arizona became a hotspot. Texas and Florida became a hotspot, and some of the cases started to spike. But some of the more recent trends are showing some interesting trends, which I think are hopeful. Okay, I'm not saying this is all conclusive, but what you're seeing here is hospitalization trends. So you can see definitely about June 13th, Arizona peaked in the number of hospitalizations relative to COVID. And you can see that it's falling. Now that trend line is good. Can it go back up again? Certainly it can go back up again. Can it continue in that? Sure, it could. You know, it could do a lot of different things, but I like the trend. I like where that's going. That gives me a little bit of hope that August 17th is a more realistic date, that we come back in person in class. Let me show you some other data here. Here's some, this is COVID-19 discharge data. And what this is showing is that patients are being discharged at a higher rate. So this is also good to see as well. Okay, of course, it's not all conclusive. It's just one data point in a set. It could all reverse at a moment's notice. Some other facts here is that if you look at where we are today with certain rates, the trend again is looking a little bit better. Okay, so one is hospitalizations in June were about 11%. Now they're at about, you know, just under 5%. So that's trending. The mortality rate in June was 4.43%. Now it's down to 1.8%. Okay, so I'm not going to show you all the scary data. A lot of that's out there. We all see that. This is a little more hopeful data. And I guess the point here that I want to take away is we do see some data in addition to the scary data that is hopeful, that does help us just help us have a little more confidence that we are going to be back in school August 17th. We're not naive to the fact that this can change on a moment's notice, and if it will, we'll follow what the local guidance is. Okay, so I'm going to unshare this here. And let me just state one other thing here is if you've been with Heritage for a little bit, you know that we will always follow the law. And there's lots of directives coming out, whether it's the governor's executive order or it's the county health department, or maybe it's a local jurisdiction like the town of Queen Creek with regards to anything for that matter, right? And the big topic, and we're going to get into some of the details here, is like face coverings. What are the local requirements there? And if they require it, we're going to follow the law, right? Let me just make a point here that those restrictions rise and fall with those COVID case rates that I was just looking at. And so if the trends hold that the COVID hospitalization rates and the mortality rates and the discharge rates, if those continue to fall, some of these restrictions that we've seen from Maricopa County and the town of Queen Creek are also going to recede as well. And we'll talk about how that impacts things. So it's not a fixed issue at this point in terms of like, are all students going to be required to wear masks when they return? Well, if we continue to hockey stick, well, they're not going to even let us back. So the mask issue really isn't even that germane if the health, if the COVID situation continues to worsen, if that makes sense. Okay. But Heritage is going to follow the law, and whatever the local jurisdictions say or the state says, we're going to follow. Now, at the same time, we are definitely in communication with our local leaders. I've communicated regularly with Speaker Bowers, with the Senate Ed Chair, with our local representatives that are over Queen Creek, such as Representative Warren Peterson and Representative Grantham. They represent the citizens and businesses in this particular part of the state of Arizona. I'm pleased that they're representing us well, with regards to businesses reopening, schools reopening, and they give us some good information on a regular basis. And so they're advocating for us to continue to reopen in a safe, responsible way. Okay, so I'm gonna go to another presentation here.
Jared, I'm just gonna hop in. Can everybody hear me? This is Kathleen Lopez.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to join on my phone. For some reason, my computer wasn't working. I just want to let everyone know that we did record this. I clicked record so that we could have this available to parents if they were not able to attend. So just wanted to let everyone know that the meeting is being recorded. If you want to turn your face off, like with the button, you can click the camera button if you prefer not to have that be on there. Thanks. Sorry for interrupting.
No problem at all. So I'm going to share another screen here that we're going to go through. Let's go through some of the details. Now, some of you have seen the email that has the link to the reopening plan. I wanted to go through that here so we have a chance to highlight a couple of those things. And I told Mrs. Lopez that this will be like watching a football game. I'm going to do the play-by-play, and she gets to do the color commentary. So here we go. Is that screen coming across okay? Okay, great.
Yes.
All right, let me know if it flashes. If somebody hits the sharing button, then it'll override this, and I'll go ahead and just reshare it. So, okay, so again, 2 weeks ago, you should have received an email that has a link to this reopening plan. It's also on our web page, the COVID page, that has a lot of information. So effectively, we're doing the dimmer switch instead of the flip the switch approach, right? Where we're phasing in rather than just going full steam. But our phase is in 2 phases. The first phase is up through July 15th. So we've already been in this phase, and this is really a couple parts. First is preparing the facility with extra cleaning, with buying extra materials such as hand sanitizers and Kleenex, ordering those, making sure those are available. So there's sort of the preparation. Then there's also the training of our teachers. That's going to happen also. And then also we're just getting new information from the county and the state in terms of what their protocols and requirements are for reopening. So that's really what phase one is. Currently for athletics, they're having a 2-week moratorium on practices and games, but those will start to resume after a couple of weeks as well. Phase two for us is going to start July 15th, and that's when we're going to continue to monitor health and safety, both of our faculty, but also we want to hear from families that are becoming ill. We're not requiring anybody to report anything, but we want to start hearing from you on that. It's also going to be a time when we're going to ramp up additional training on various protocols for our faculty. They're going to return on their normal time, and then school is going to continue and open on its normal on the normal start date that we've previously published for the school calendar. So I'm going to stop there and see, Ms. Lopez, did you want to add anything here in terms of our reopening phases?
No, not right now, thanks.
Okay. Let me go to the next one here. We'll probably spend a little bit more time on some of the safety precautions. The first sentence here, scholars and staff should stay home if they are sick or feel symptoms. Okay, now I know that sounds kind of obvious, right? And it's really the same standard that we're asking if we, without COVID, right? If you feel sick, you need to stay home and don't pass around the flu. We have made some policy changes we're going to get to in a little bit so that there aren't people that feel like they're losing anything with regards to citizenship points or grades or awards. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's really what a lot of this pivots on, and the health of our school is self-governing, right? And that's a big thing at Heritage. We have to be self-governing people. And so it starts when you wake up in the morning. If the scholar feels sick or is showing symptoms, we're asking for families to just do what they would normally do as responsible parents, is to say, hey, do you need to stay home? Are you sick? Do we need to take care of things? And exactly the same thing. I think we're on more heightened alert now with COVID, but that's really the standard. And as long as we can hold to that, and obviously there's a measure of trust we're going to have with each other to have self-governing, and we live in a self-governing society, but it really matters now so that we don't pass anything around and transmit things. I realize there's the asymptomatic people that are potentially walking around and some transmissions. I'm not sure how we can really screen on that. We're going to talk about health screenings here next. We've put out in this document that health screenings will be conducted by staff during class periods as ongoing wellness monitoring throughout the day. So here's what this means. Well, let's start with what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that we're keeping records. It doesn't mean that we're contact tracing. That's more the purview of Maricopa County's health department. It's not a purview of the schools. We're not doing that. What we mean by health screening is when there's two parts. There's the part that I just talked about from the parent side, right? You need to do a little bit of screening before, and don't bring them to school if they're sick, number one. Number two, when they get to school and they come into class, a teacher's going to ask, is there anybody that's feeling sick? Is there anybody that is, and they're going to visually look for symptoms. Now, teachers visually look anyways. They do that all the time. That's a standard part of their job anyways. And if a student looks like they are in some distress, some physical distress from illness, naturally they go talk to them. How are you feeling? Are you not feeling good? They know that they're not going to have a productive day and learning is not going to be optimal. But we are going to take that extra step and just ask them, hey, is anybody not feeling well, or is anybody feeling symptoms? And if they raise their hand or say, you know what, I'm really not feeling good, there's no shame in that. We're going to get them some support. So a next step in that would be that they would be able to go down to the front office. We'll have a thermometer there. We can take a temperature. And if, let's say, there's another step that's needed, if they just need a break and then they go back, then they can do that. But if they really are in a downward spiral where they're not feeling good and they have a temperature, then obviously we're going to be calling the parents. We'll put them in a room where there won't be a lot of other children there, and make sure their parents are notified right away to come pick them up. And at that point, it's probably wise to take them into a doctor to, if they're showing COVID-related symptoms, to go through those particular protocols and just follow your doctor's orders at that point. Okay, so that's what we mean by health screening. Is at the beginning of class, teachers will do a visual check, and then they'll ask a question, and then the protocols will kick in there if needed. Let me stop on that.
I just had a quick little note on taking your kid to the doctor. I know doctors that I've been to don't want you going into the office. They want you to call, and then they will instruct you.
Thank you. That's a good point. I appreciate you doing that, or saying that. Ms. Lopez, did you want to add anything there on that topic?
Just so that parents know, that we're not going to call kids out publicly. I did have there was a question in the chat already about allergies. I know Mr. Taylor and I share that luckiness. We both have allergies. We're not going to call kids out if they're sniffling. It's just a general idea of how kids are going. And if there is a concern, it would be asked very privately, just some check-ins with the kids. So hopefully that answers the allergy question. We do know that everyone at different times has allergies in Arizona, and we don't plan to send kids home just because they do have those allergies.
Yeah, thank you on that one. So the next sentence talks about frequent hand washing. We're looking at different ways to bring in additional capacity. We have lots of sinks and bathrooms around, and with the new gym, we have even more. So those will all be utilized. We'll encourage scholars, once they arrive, to go wash their hands and then go right to class. But then between classes, continue to wash hands. We're looking at ways that we can attach some additional hand washing stations on the outside of the campus for during lunch periods and other times. So, and I think we have enough passing time between classes to have everybody wash their hands again. But if we need to get some flexibility there, then we're certainly willing to do that. So we have that. The other sentence there, masks are not allowed, masks are allowed but not required. So let me talk about this topic of facial coverings. It's been a big topic. Unfortunately, it's a big political issue now. But again, when Heritage is going to follow the law. So if the law, whether it's from the state, county, or town, is requiring it, we're going to follow the law. Okay. Now, as I understand the current status of things, the county is requiring it because the town of Queen Creek did not take action on facial covering. So the county's requirement does cover it. They have exemptions for things like physical education, and those are obvious because that's when you need more oxygen instead of less oxygen, which a mask, depending on the mask, will sometimes restrict. But the fact of the matter is the whole restriction of facial coverings, it rises and falls based on the level of COVID cases. And so as COVID cases come down, then schools will be able to reopen, and the need for restrictive facial covering policies are not even going to be needed anymore. Those local jurisdictions or the county jurisdictions are not going to continue those when the cases are following, and we can return to a more open school environment. So again, the rule of thumb is we're going to follow the law. We can't predict what all the facial covering policies are going to be come August 17th. But as we know, they get more restrictive when the cases go up and less restrictive when the cases go down. So the chances are these facial covering restrictions from the county and the state are going to loosen up as schools reopen. Okay. But as a school board, as a Heritage entity, we're not having the requirement to wear a mask in class as an example. The only thing I'll add on this one here is the basic rule of thumb is where social distancing is not possible, masks are appropriate, and they do contain or limit the transmission of COVID. So as we've thought about a school, about when those are the most at risks, one of the areas that we've identified is the vans when we're transporting it. If we're going to an athletic facility, so we will have encouragement and a requirement to have masks in the van. And once they get out to go to swim, as an example, then you can take the mask off. But that's a pretty contained environment, and you can't have your proper social distancing in a van. So, that's where it does make some sense, and there is some science to that. But as a general rule, in class and around campus and at lunchtime, there is no heritage requirement for facial coverings. Okay, so let's move on that. We've probably beat that dead horse enough. But I can certainly add more to that if we need to talk more. So we're going to continue to limit the class sizes. They're already small. The average class size is under 25. But we do have some classes that are over 25. And so one common question we get on class sizes is something like choir. What are you going to do about choir? Because there may be some droplets that are transmitted. And so what we're not going to stop the performing arts. That's an important part. We're just going to spread out. We're going to space out a little bit more. We have an auditorium and we're going to make good use of it. So, and then when some of the social distancing loosens up and the COVID rates drop, then we can, resume the normal programming for things like choir. So that's how we're moving forward with some of those programs, but we're not taking them out of the schedule of classes until this whole thing blows away. We will have choir when we resume. As an example, we will have instrumental music. We're just going to spread them out. Maybe we'll do more sectional work, so you have smaller groups. We're going to leave that up to the choir directors. I'm certainly not going to attempt to direct that from where I sit. But they know what the guidelines are. But generally, we're going to spread out a little bit more, but they will be held. I think that's what I wanted to say on this one. Ms. Lopez, what do you want to add, if anything, here?
I just want to hop in a couple questions that have been coming up in the chat that I can address with safety precautions. Someone asked about social distancing in the stairwells and at lunch. So our stairwells, we're going to change so that one stairwell goes one direction and the other one goes another direction. So just for example, we haven't decided which one yet, but east is up and then west is down. So that will hopefully help there. At lunchtime, we have the entire outdoors, and we'll also be able to open some indoor space, just like we always have when it's been really hot in the auditorium, so that there will be room for kiddos to spread out in there. And then let's see here. I think that was the only social distancing questions that we had in there. So hopefully that answers those parents' questions at this point.
Yeah. Thanks, Kathleen. I do see another question here from Jenna Ray. Hi, Jenna. Thanks for the question. And it was more of a mask question. And if they don't want to, if there is a requirement and we extend that as a school because we're going to follow the law, can they go online? So let's just talk about the online. You saw an email that came out, and we're asking families to decide by the time we return, and right now that's August 17th, do you want your child to continue in that online format through the end of the semester, or do you want them to return? So now's the time to decide that. I know that it's a little bit unfair because we don't know what the mask policies are going to be at that time. Like I said, all we can do is understand what those trends are, and typically they're looser or more loose. But the reason why we have the 10th as a time when we need you to decide, we need to provide the highest quality education possible for your young people. And if we're going back and forth from in class to online, that's a lot of change, and they're just not going to get as quality of an education if we're flipping back and forth from online. So we're asking people to make at least a semester commitment, and then, but we are not giving the seat away. We're not bringing new enrollment. We're not doing that by any means. That seat will still be there, so in January they can come back. I know some schools are saying that they're going to come back. You can switch back and forth. I don't know how they're reasonably going to do that, because that is a lot of switching back and forth. In some cases, the online teacher will be different from the in-class teacher. We're not going to be asking our teachers to teach 2 classes and effectively double their workload, teach these online and these in class. That would deteriorate everything for everybody. That would be a complete disaster. So in some cases, if you're going to an online class, you're going to be with a teacher that's dedicated to the success of that particular class. And it could be an excellent math teacher out of the Mesa campus that's covering that particular online class, or it could be out of our Maricopa camp, or someone from the Gateway campus, and they'll take all of the online students in that particular class. But the important thing is they need that continuity to have the most success and the highest quality of education for that particular semester. So we are asking people to let us know by the 10th what they want to do come the reopening period, which currently is the 17th, and that would be through the semester. So I wanted to address that one. That's come up a couple of times here. Okay, let me get to this one here. We've talked about this a little bit. We've already done a lot of increased cleaning around the facilities. We've updated our checklist both for the classroom. As you know, at the end of every class, at the end of every day, students clean up their classroom for that particular class. What we're switching up here is we're going to have some cleaning that's done at the beginning of every class. And we've updated the checklist. We've bought more material and cleaning supplies, so that can happen at the beginning of each class period. So your child will know that that desk and that room is clean because they're going to be part of that. Now, we have the classroom cleaning. Those checklists are updated with more supplies. We have the common areas. Those are going to be cleaned more. We have more cleaning supplies there available. We've already done some extensive summertime cleaning. We're going to increase the intensity of the cleaning from our contracted cleaning partner. That's Citywide, and they do a great job. And they're going to go ahead and up their game as well. So for the common areas at the end of every day. So we love Bruce. Mr. Allred. He does a great job, and we're going to continue to have a beautiful and clean school building. Ms. Lopez, what do you want to add on this one, if anything?
There's been a question about cleaning, about whether our scholars will be doing the cleaning. Yes, but they'll be just cleaning up after themselves and preparing for themselves. So what that looks like at the end of my first hour is the kiddos who were sitting at those desks clean those desks off. And then at the beginning of my second hour, the kiddos that come in clean the desks off again, just so they know it's a clean space. They're good for them. The high touch surfaces like doorknobs and the stairwells and those things, those will be done by staff. Like Mr. Taylor said, Mr. Allred will be helping us with those.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lopez. We've also had a lot of questions on close contact classes. So what we mean by this is athletics and other things like ballroom dance or dance classes where there may be some contact. So we anticipate bringing those back. We're not pulling those out of the catalog. When we come back for in-person classes, those classes will be held, and we'll respect any person that wants to wear any facial covering for that. But we're going to continue to hold ballroom dance. We're going to continue to hold athletics to the fullest extent that we can. If there's some directive that comes down from the Canyon Athletic Association that limits how we practice, or from the state in terms of performance, then we'll go ahead and follow that. Right now, there are not any restrictions outside of a 2-week moratorium right now on practicing. They have pushed the game schedule out 3 or 4 weeks, so most of the athletic competitions will start. I think it's after Labor Day, if I remember that schedule, but those will continue. Okay, let's go to.
I had a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Victoria Yance. My son is new to Heritage Gateway there, and I think he's assigned to take Kempo Karate. Is that on the school premises or is that off school premises?
Thanks for the question. It's on school premises, and that'll continue.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I wanted to touch on a couple of FAQs here, and Kathleen, I'll have you jump in on a couple of these here. One thing that we have incentives for students that we want them to be on campus, and we want them to be rewarded for that. But in some cases, those incentives are people will come to school sick to get the perfect attendance award, as an example. So we're going to temporarily suspend that, because we want people, if they're sick, to stay home, and they'll continue to work online to the extent that they can. Let's say that they're working online, but they're sick. We're asking parents to call in just like normal. Call in the absence. Call the front desk. Let them know that they're absent. Just because they're home doesn't necessarily mean that they're not able to do schoolwork. We're going to adjust citizenship points so it's not tied to attendance, but we'll continue to reflect things like preparedness and other behaviors. So, Ms. Lopez, anything on this slide that you want to highlight?
Just to reinforce that we are going to try to work really closely with your kiddos when they don't feel well. So if you're legitimately sick, of course that absence is excused, and each teacher will have their own late work policy that will allow kiddos to turn in work for full credit at the time that they're, based on that late work policy and with their illness. So we don't want to have kiddos feeling penalized for not coming to school if they don't feel well, or like Mr. Taylor said, even if you're doing distance learning and you're ill, you may be too ill to work online even. So that's just really important. And then about the citizenship points, just to reiterate, while everyone is online, citizenship is going to look different even than it does when we are able to be in person. So each teacher will come up with their own plan for how they're going to assess citizenship points during the online portion. The slide that Mr. Taylor is presenting refers to what that looks like when we're in person. So we are taking out the attendance portion of citizenship, but being on time to class means when we're in person and you show up on class. So I know that's a little, maybe a little vague, but we don't want to lock anybody, kids or teachers, into something that doesn't make sense for that particular class or situation.
Okay, let me get to one. I think we have one last slide here. These are some questions that we've just received from parents randomly, and we've seen enough of them to know that probably be good to just review these here again. I think we touched on absences a little bit here. Again, Google Classroom is really a supplementary tool right now, but it's a very much a good tool that is used pretty much in all the classes. And so that'll be the online vehicle. It'll continue to be used throughout the semester as a supplement if your child returns to class, and it'll be the learning management system if they're online. Now, one of the questions in here is, will some teachers be assigned to distance only or split classes? There will be some teachers, as I mentioned, that'll be just dedicated to the online format. And then there's others that, but for the most part, we're not going to be asking teachers to do both double duty. There will be office hours posted on the Google Classroom, so that should make it a lot easier for scholars, whether they're in class or out, at home, to know when they can get help and the best way to contact a teacher to get additional assistance there. I think I've talked about the screenings one, so I'm gonna.
If I just hop in real quick, Mr. Taylor, and maybe kind of just answer some questions. There's a difference between what's going to happen when everyone is online versus those families that choose to have their kiddos online for the entire time. So when everyone is online, our gateway teachers are going to be the ones who are teaching those courses. If your kiddo decides, or if your family decides it's best for your kiddo for them to be online for the entire semester, that's when they may have a different teacher than a gateway teacher. I know another comment was about, teachers recording their lessons. That I know our math teachers did a phenomenal job at that last year, and so did some of our other teachers. So that is something that each teacher is going to continue to work on when everybody is online. For the kiddos that choose online for the entire semester, that's going to look different depending on what teacher has that class. Someone else asked about online for labs with biology, chemistry, those types of things. Again, our teachers are just going to do the very best they can to present that information online. That is one of the big challenges of an online curriculum. So videos that the teacher does, or maybe posting to a YouTube video of the experiment being done, might be something that you might see.
Okay, so at this point, Ms. Lopez, maybe we just pick up some additional questions that have come through in the chat, and then we'll go through. We probably covered a lot of them, and there's probably some other ones that are new or maybe some different angles, but do you want to go ahead and read off a couple that we haven't covered already?
Absolutely. And I've been trying to write them down too, so I don't miss any.
Yeah.
Let's see. The first one what electives will be available in the fall semester. So I guess that depends. If you choose to be online for the entire semester, the electives we're offering are PE, a general music, not instrumental, and art. If you are returning in person, all of the electives will be there. If distance learning, will they be able to do American Sign Language? No, that's not one of the languages that at this point we feel like is manageable for a kiddo who goes online for the whole semester. And next question is, how will they do music class with instruments? And I think the short answer to that is our music teacher will work with the kiddos to make sure they have the instruments they need, and they would rent those. Mr. Taylor, do you have any different information on that?
Well, we just talked about spreading out. I'm not sure if that was a distancing question, but we're going to continue to have the class. We're going to spread out, do probably more sectionals. We're going to leave that up to the teacher. We're going to give them some ideas, but we're definitely going to have them and just spread out a little bit more in that particular room, or use some of our larger rooms until we, until the cases of COVID die down a little bit.
Okay, and then the next question says, if they audition for junior choir, but they're going to do distance learning the first semester, can they still participate in this? And no online dance options. So if they're online all semester, it would be a general music class, but they could come back and participate in choir or dance when they return in person. Next question, I do think you answered this, Mr. Taylor. My husband's super concerned about mask wearing. It would probably be very difficult to wear a mask all day if the state super and or governor mandates that. Can we switch to online?
Yeah, I addressed that earlier.
Okay. Is the elementary school still moving forward?
Well, to the extent the credit markets are friendly, it is. So we think that there's a great opportunity there, and we've heard that there is a great opportunity, and but at this point we're on hold on that, probably just for another year until the credit markets open up for that opportunity. So that's the status on that.
Okay, the next question says, last year the online school consisted of kids given assignments to complete without much instruction. Is it possible to have a teacher in a classroom teaching a class on Zoom or some other platform so it more closely represents in-person learning? So again, I'm going to answer this question for the two different scenarios. When we're all online, it will be your scholars, gateway teachers who are doing the very best they can to present instruction online. We are going to encourage and require some more participation, and so I think that will help. There might be scheduled Zoom meetings from teachers, and then if you choose online all semester, again, that will be curriculum that's designed for online learning, so hopefully that meets the need. I think that we answered this question about some teachers being assigned to distance learning only, or will some split duties?
Yep, we covered that.
We answered the one about science labs for biology and chemistry. Next question is, when doing online learning, before they're allowed to do in-person learning, will the school week be 4 or 5 days, and will they need to be logged in by 8 a.m.? So it is a 4-day school week. We did have a typo in the information that was shared with you guys. It is still Monday through Thursday. They do need to log in to their first hour by 8:15, and then they need to log into the rest of their courses for that day by 2:30, I believe, 2:15 or 2:30.
Yeah, the important thing there, if I could just add, is they need to be in the same habit as in person, so it's not a big culture shock. You know, I've got 3 children that are in school, and they all like to stay up really late, and they think online, you know, when we were in the online mode back in the quarter, it was like, oh, all right, then we can stay up really late and start doing our home. That doesn't really work. You know, I call it Hawaii time. They like to wake up really late, and no, we want them in the same habit, because as soon as we can come back, there's not going to be this big, huge shift. You know, so logging in, reporting attendance by 8 o'clock is just like what they would do in an in-person. Work on the same classes in the same time periods. So when they are back in class, it's not going to be too hard of a transition. So just to add on that, positive habits.
Thank you. Next question is about yearbook class. Again, our yearbook teacher is going to work as hard as she can to do the best that she can for those kiddos while we're online. I don't have a specific answer about what her class will look like right now. A follow-up question to this was, what about last year's yearbook? Our publisher, we are not letting them off the hook. They still know we want our yearbook. As soon as we get it, we will let everyone know. What dual enrollment elective classes will be offered, and will we have to do some through Rio Salado? So the dual enrollment classes that we will have will be our academic classes. So math, science, history, English, and our languages that are dual enrollment. We're not able to support the dual enrollment electives that we have online right now, but your kiddos could definitely enroll concurrently through Rio Salado and participate in their online class. I think we talked about allergies. That's another dual enrollment question. We talked about social distancing in the stairwells and the hallways. That was another question. Mr. Taylor, do you have anything to add about that, the social distancing? I think that came up a couple times, like, are we really going to be able to enforce social distancing in our classrooms and hallways?
I don't think I have anything else to add on that. I think the stairwells is appropriate. That's something that a lot of schools are looking at. So I don't think I have anything else new, any new information on that.
Okay. How do I get my child's schedule for this year? Your kiddo schedules will be available on PowerSchool. couple days before school starts. So you should expect some email communications from our front office with all kinds of information about email addresses and PowerSchool logins and all those good things. So those are coming soon. Okay, I think you answered this as well, Mr. Taylor. If my child returns to school once it is allowed and then decides they would like to go back to online learning, will Heritage allow them to switch back for the remainder of the semester?
Yeah, the short answer is no. We need them to stay online to maintain the quality of education. Switching back and forth would be disruptive for them. In some cases, they're going to get a new teacher if they go online and back and forth. So I think that's as we kick that around, we talked a lot about that, and really the whole point here is what's the best thing for the child. The best thing is for them to have the same teacher, so that they know they're getting the best educational experience, and that means consistency and continuity.
Okay, and just one more follow-up on that, and I know Mr. Taylor said this, but I just want to reiterate it. If there's an illness in your family, if your health situation changes and you are in person and need to move online, that's definitely something that we can make happen for your family. So this is kind of a general question. I'd like some more information on how online school will work. Will there be more opportunity for students to interact with the teachers and the class? So hopefully, yes. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to try and require some more participation, have some more set meeting times via Zoom or Google Meet like this, where the scholars can interact with their teacher and one another. Will water fountains or bathrooms be restricted? So water fountains are going to be used only to fill up water bottles. We're asking that the scholars not put their mouth on the spigot. There are no restrictions to the bathroom right now, except we'll just ask the kiddos to wait outside if all the stalls are full. Try and encourage them to not gather in there. How will social distancing be enforced at lunch? Will the kids have the freedom to group with friends as they normally have? If mask mandates continue as school goes forward, how will that be enforced? This county may not remove that mandate this fall. I think we answered all those. Did you feel that way, Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, I think we have. I'd just add that we are buying some additional picnic tables, and we're going to be able to space them out a little bit more. So I think that'll help, but I think I've already answered the other aspects of that question.
Okay. Someone's asking for more information on online learning. Hopefully that was addressed. Will children be allowed to eat outdoors, or will they be stuck in a classroom? Hopefully that was addressed as well. We will, of course, have our eating outside and encourage the kids to spread out across the field and the grass. And how will tests be administered for the online students? Will online students be able to meet one-on-one with teachers, either via Zoom, FaceTime, or on campus if furthering tutoring is needed? So this is actually something that we just talked about. We are discussing having like testing sessions where the kids are very socially distanced, like no more than 15 kids in our largest classrooms, having them have the opportunity to take tests there. In fact, if you have an incoming 7th grader, you're going to get some information about taking our math placement test that way in the next couple weeks. There will definitely be online tutoring. Teachers will have online office hours where scholars can meet with them. And as far as tutoring face-to-face, I think that if the teacher is comfortable with that and the parent and scholar are comfortable with that, then that is likely something that can be arranged. Mr. Taylor, do you have any thoughts or concerns about that?
Nope, that sounds good.
Okay, what is the protocol for scholars who fall within the mask exemption guidelines? Will staff be stopping and asking scholars to wear masks? I think we answered this, right?
Yeah, if there's a mask requirement or a facial covering requirement and someone has asthma as an example, there's no browbeating, no bullying, no ostracizing. We take pride in our school. Not that doesn't exist, but at a much, much lower rate that you see in other places. So no, we'll be respectful for those that are exempt or that that choose to wear masks. So that's fine.
Next question, will there be a school orientation or tour for scholars who are new to the school? Absolutely. As soon as we are able to allow that, we will allow that. We'll try to figure out ways for kiddos to come in, walk their schedule, definitely. My child transitions to in-class from online the second semester, they will have a different teacher. It is a possibility. I can't say for certain, but it is a possibility. I think that we answered Mrs. Markham's class about teachers recording their lessons. We talked about the classroom cleanings, talked about the online electives, general PE, art, and general music. Cleaning of the lunch area between junior and senior high lunch. Yes, we will do we'll definitely do that. Someone else asked about the restrooms. Those will be cleaned as well. I know that kiddos change in there. Will instruction minutes be used for the cleaning or passing minutes twice each hour? We have about a 7-8 minute passing period most of the time, so hopefully kiddos can get in, get their desks cleaned, and not take away from instruction. During spring online, the students were able to complete the assignments throughout the day, which was convenient with families with multiple children doing online. Will that be the same going forward for online classes? So there will be different due dates than the way it was fourth quarter. So let's say that Mrs. Peoples has drama 3A. She may ask that her 3A scholars turn their drama homework in by the end of that 3A class period on Monday or Wednesday. But the kiddos will be able to do their work when they want to do their work. There just may be some Zoom meetings or Google Meets that are required for kiddos to have that interaction with their teachers. Sports be shortened season. Will sports be a shortened season? So I think Coach Levitt answered that, Mrs. Aiken. Talked about tutoring. Another concern about, please address what steps the school will be taking to ensure appropriate distancing between students. Mr. Taylor, did you have any additional thoughts about that?
Well, we talked about how we're going to have additional picnic tables, or lunch tables, and those will be spread out. We talked about how in some of the larger classes like choir, maybe instrument, just to spread out a little bit more, or to use sectionals. There are some classrooms, like some of the science rooms, that do have additional room where tables can be spaced out a little bit more. Admittedly, there's some classrooms that are small. We can't really push the walls out. So to the extent that we can spread the tables out or desks, then we'll go ahead and do that to the greatest extent possible. But we're not going to, there's not a way in every single classroom to have a minimum of 6 feet. In some of our classrooms, we can. In other classrooms, it might be 4 feet. So.
Okay, this is Mr. Taylor's favorite thing to talk about. Will citizenship be offered for students online after everyone else goes back?
Well, of course, that's one of the most important classes that you're going to take of the day. And this year for citizenship, we're focused on George Washington. And he's one of our heroes, and we are not ashamed of George Washington. We're not ashamed of his life. We're not ashamed of his teachings. And we want everybody to learn about the great person that he is, the father of our nation, and learn how we can become like him by understanding how he lived his life and the standards one of my favorite things about George Washington is he made a big list, over 100 things of standards of behavior for him. And so that's a really fun part when we get to that every year. So we don't have that totally worked out, but we have a new little angle that we're going to add, where we're going to emphasize a little bit more of the behavioral qualities of trustworthiness and humility and all of those great things that George Washington had for us. So I'm looking forward to citizenship class this year. It's going to be great.
It is. George Washington is awesome. There were a couple questions about 504 plans and IEPs. We still do have our special education staff who will work closely with those kiddos and their families and make sure that their teachers are aware of the accommodations that they need, and they will do everything they can to make sure that all those needs are met. If you have specific questions about that, you can definitely email me, and I can direct you to the right people to answer those. So someone's asking, they haven't participated in the distance learning before. Can you explain the online learning for electives? So online learning for electives, I know we have some of our elective teachers here. They did a great job last quarter of doing the very best they could and providing a class that is very much an in-person activity. So our elective teachers did such a good job, and I don't have a good answer for that because I was not in choir or PE, but I can assure you that the kiddos did get to participate in those activities, and it was, those teachers did the best they could to make it worthwhile. Can you please explain better the parent requirement for checking in with their student every day and what accommodations can be made for families with two working parents? So we do know that our parents often work and there's often many children. It does not have to be a parent who is that success coach. It could be an adult sibling. It could be a different family member. The purpose is just to have someone else in that scholar's corner who's helping to make sure they're completing the work online, getting what they need to be done, and knowing what to do if they have questions. Mr. Taylor, did you have anything to add there?
No, I think you covered it. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. I know we're running out of time here. General music will be determined. We're just saying general music in that they don't need an instrument to participate in the course. We'll have one of our heritage music teachers work on this curriculum. It likely will be some theory, stuff like that. Online learning is Monday through Thursday. Just to reiterate that, there was a typo. How will my child complete the foreign language if it will not be offered? So if they signed up for ASL and you want to be online for the entire semester, then you might just have to take that a different year. I think is the best answer for that question. I think we're coming up to the end here, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, Kathleen, thank you for reading those off. There are some that we've already answered that are down there, but there's others that we probably need to follow up. So, Ms. Lopez, if you'll just go ahead and copy those into a document, we can work on some answers and get those out. But I hope this hour's been helpful for you to understand a couple of things. Number one, our commitment to returning to the regular model that we have. We know it's successful. We know that relationship between a teacher and a student and the parent is just very, very vital. And we're excited to get back to that. I'm excited to see some of the trends that are here that are getting a lot better. And we're anticipating resuming. Now things can turn around and new guidelines can be issued, but each of you have chosen Heritage because you want the highest quality education for your child, and that's what we're here to do. That's our commitment as well. We have these restrictions on us currently, but all of the discussions we've always had is what's the best interest, how do we act in the best interest of our child and their learning environment, their academic progress. We don't want to see the summer slide continue any longer than it has to. They have important goals to reach. They need to get ready for their college entrance tests. They have some scholarships that they're applying for. I mean, there's lots of things in their future that if there's any further delay in education, it's only going to put them back even further. So we're continuing to provide our full program as early as we can. We will follow the law, of course, but I like the trends that they are lightening up a little bit. And I'm looking forward to resuming on the 17th. Now, if there's any questions that we have not answered, go ahead and type them into the chat right now so Mrs. Lopez can capture those. And if there's anything that you heard that's concerning that you'd like more information on, also go ahead and send us an email or give us a phone call, and we'll definitely circle back with you. But I want to thank you for being here tonight. I want to thank Mrs. Lopez for helping me out here. Some of the teachers that are on here, I see Mr. Allred. Thank you, Bruce and Miss Peoples and and the other faculty. And thank you very much for being here tonight.
Yeah, one question to answer. We are still planning on doing our theater production. Fingers crossed. Our Mrs. Peoples, Mrs. Albrechtson, and the wonderful Layton family who are doing our choreography are working on that. So we are going to try to continue to do that. And yes, just to reiterate what Mr. Taylor said, please email us if we weren't able to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you. And with that, have a good evening, everybody.
Thank
Goodbye.
you, Mr. Taylor.